Hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most telling you about today's episode of JJ Meets World. It features Phil Godel, who is a board game expert and previous guest of JJ Meets World. He lets us know all the ins and outs of playing board games and the fact that board games are really having a moment right now. Plus, Tucker and I talk about whether or not he could beat me in a game of Monopoly. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
I remember seeing the movie Jumanji in theaters and being awestruck. I thought the effects were amazing. The story was awesome. And the thing I liked the most about Jumanji was it teamed the kids up with adults. And the adults didn't treat them like children because they needed them, and neither of them had a real parenting edge to them. Of course, Robin Williams' character Alan had been trapped in the jungle for all that time. Mm-hmm. And Bonnie, what's her name? Bonnie, whatever her name is, her character, had been ostracized in the town. But I love the idea of kids playing this game with adults. And I remember as a kid, I would give anything for my parents to play a board game with me. But there weren't a lot of games that really spanned between children and adults. You didn't have an opportunity to play something other than Hi-Ho Cherry-O, which my dad was not anxious to play.
That was one of those movies where it just made you as a kid go, man, real life is boring. How come like crazy adventures don't pop out of games the way that this does?
I remember wishing that my parents owned a sneaker factory. And is that how shoe factories worked back in the day? Is that how they looked?
No idea.
Just yesterday, I was walking my dog and I stepped in some mud and I said, "Oh, I got mud on my sneaks." And my wife instantly said, "What? Your what?" And I'm like, "My sneaks." You've never called them that? You've never called them your sneaks? And then she reminded me that she does not care for the show Pete and Pete. Which is grounds for divorce if I've ever heard it.
She better never say that ever again. She just needs to be quiet about that.
There's that. Do you remember that episode? I think it's called Saturday, where Wayne gets a brand new pair of Krebstar Ultras.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to get grass stains. He doesn't want anything to hurt his brand new shoes.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh man, I love that.
That's a time I'd love to flash back to and just not just watch Adventures of Pete and Pete, but watch it in like the early 90s.
And I think that was a show that was way ahead of its time. You watch that now and you think, gosh, if they made this show on Netflix today, there would be Pete and Pete merchandise everywhere. They would instantly get greenlit for a movie.
It's too bad there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no Adventures of Pete and Pete board games. That would be a fun board game.
Wouldn't it be? In fact, I can't think of an episode where they play a board game. I'd have to really stretch my mind because it seems like every now and then you find a great piece of pop culture that involves a board game. Of course, Jumanji being probably the most in your face of all of them.
Yeah.
But there are great episodes. The show Community plays Dungeons and Dragons, which is a role-playing board game. And that episode is amazing because the whole episode takes place inside of a single room. But you would imagine, like, just the way they use their imaginations, there's no cutaways, but you feel like you go on this epic quest. Card Wars is a game created in the show Adventure Time that is just out of this world. What
Cones of Dunshire.
Cones of Dunshire. Oh, Cones of Dunshire. That is one of those throwaway gags that I'm so glad they let pay out in the show Parks and Rec. And the fact that the game has become this huge underground success and is in this giant like conglomerate technology company, and Ben is able to really show his worth to the whole group.
Uh-huh.
The beauty of board games is you can find a board game that suits just about anybody. At one point they decide, you know what, we're not marketing board games to girls enough, so let's do like the mall game or the one that's the telephone. Mystery Date is another game that I feel is very themed around women. And then they decide, you know what, we're leaving out the adventurous people out there. So let's have a board game that's based in the wild where you can have all the attributes of camping, only you never have to leave your living room. I love board games, and there's so many different ones out. So we invited Phil Godel. You've heard him on JJ Meets World before, because I don't know anybody who knows more about board games than this kid. And it's because he owns more board games than almost anybody I know.
He's definitely an authority. He teaches us some terms about board games that I never even knew before.
And I beyond that, I also get to call out Phil on the things that bother me the most about playing board games with him, because he is one of the most frustrating individuals when it comes to playing a board game, but it's because he plays them so well. I imagine it's the reason why everyone gets frustrated with Han Solo in the Star Wars films, because he's so cool.
I forgot to ask you this in the interview. If you and Phil went head to head at Monopoly, who wins that fight?
I would win.
You do think you would win?
I feel my skills when it comes to Monopoly are above and beyond any average player and even advanced board game players, because I have studied Monopoly so much over the years. I just know so much about the game. And it's true that it still comes down to the dice rolls and the luck, but I believe that in Monopoly, you are not playing the game, you are playing the other players. I use manipulation, I use intimidation. These are the tools that I keep within my chest when I play Monopoly. Now, I always play the battleship. I don't know why. I've never been a Navy man, but I feel the battleship and I really are 1-1. If you play a game of Monopoly, what do you pick for your piece, Tucker?
I usually do the Yorkie.
Do you?
Mm-hmm. Little puppy dog.
Why?
Little puppy dog.
Just because?
Yeah, little puppers. If they had a kitty cat, I'd do that instead. Or if they had a different kind of dog. I mean, because I like Yorkies, but they're not even close to the top. I think it's a Yorkie. Is that the breed it is? At least
I think it's a Scottish Terrier.
Scottish Terrier,
if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
but the dog. You play the dog.
The dog.
Now, the current version of Monopoly has added a cat as a piece. So,
okay. So I would play the kitty then, but I haven't played Monopoly in a very, very long time.
Knowing me, would you play me in Monopoly, or would you say like I don't think that I would enjoy that?
I know your strategy because you've talked about it on the podcast a lot. So I could just go back and sort of review that as my beginning. There are no guarantees in life, as Marlo Stanfield says. Tomorrow's promised to no one. So I can't say for certain that I would beat you. I think I would stand a fair chance, but it probably wouldn't be a 50-50 chance. I acknowledge that you would be coming in with with superior footing. You would have an advantage over me. But you're right. There is a lot of chance, and the dice could just roll my way. The cards could go my way. You never know.
I also think this. I also want to play with other people. So, a standard game of Monopoly is 4 players. 4 players is really what you need to have a good game of Monopoly. And if you and I are playing and we get 2 other idiots and you're able to game those idiots, now technically it's me against 3 people. So that could be the upper hand you could take easily.
Right.
Well, listen.
Collusion.
While Tucker and I get a Monopoly board set up, I'd like you folks to enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. It is Phil Godel's our guest. We have a great conversation about board games. I would be surprised if at least some of you didn't hit up a game store after this to bring home something new and fresh. If you do, we would love to hear about it. You can go to the JJ Meets World Facebook page or our Instagram account and let us know about a board game that you played. And maybe we missed one of your favorites in this conversation. So definitely let us know about it. We'd love it if you reached out. But let's get this thing go. Let's roll the dice, so to speak, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World with our guest, Phil Godel. It's all about board games.
JJ Meets World.
Phil, I know that you are an avid lover of board games. In fact,
of games
I don't think
in general, for the most part.
He's also an avid lover.
Yeah.
Are you a lover of aphids?
Sure.
Okay.
Wait, those are the bugs, right?
Yeah, the delightful
the cute
bugs.
little green ones.
Sure.
Yeah. Why not?
I wanted to have Phil on to talk about board games because I noticed that every single family holiday and regular calendar-based holiday in the Godel family is based around getting together to play board games in one way or another.
Yeah. Anytime I'm visiting my parents or I am over at my brother's house, there is a game that we are playing. And I feel slightly bad in the aspect of we have so many games that there are many that just go unplayed. Even though we really, really enjoy them, there's just too much to play.
Can we get some raw numbers real quick? Like even if you have to hazard a guess, like if you were to look at the closet with all the board games in it, how many are we talking?
Are you talking about me or as
you specifically, Phil? Because I have a very strong opinion about this. I judge someone's board game expertise by their board game archive, not just number, but storage style, how well they're keeping it, presentation and everything. Because I've known a number of people with various degrees of board games love and knowledge, and it seems to kind of coincide with their collection. So it would help me know how much we should all be respecting your opinion on board games if you could illustrate that.
Well, I guess it depends on how you consider the options, because are you talking about just a board game in and of itself? Do you include the expansion as a separate game?
Really, I'm
because
just asking
it's a separate...
I'm really just asking if you could describe your board game storage area.
Right now, it's not great. To be honest. And partially it's because I'm a little bit more new to the collection aspect. Okay. Although I've been playing many, many, many games for many years, I just more recently have started getting them for myself instead of relying on my brothers or buying it and giving it to my dad for Christmas. Mm-hmm. So right now, it's sitting, my personal games are sitting in the coat closet, and in there's a little like coat and shoe bin thing next to the front door, and on top of it there are probably, I would say, maybe 10 games, and in the little chest area where you usually put a bunch of shoes, there's probably another 10 games.
Okay.
So what
But
Phil
they
is
are,
saying
they are
is
all very well taken care of, though.
he has a closet that he's filled with games, and now they've spilled into the foyer
Yeah.
and are filling up spaces that don't normally contain board games. I've been to Phil's house on occasion when there's a game night, and I am shocked at the number of options that there are available. And Phil, let me really get the conversation going with this.
Sure.
We're in a board game renaissance right now.
Absolutely.
I can't remember a time where there have been more board games available or more board games that people just have in their home than what we have right now. It used to be everyone had a dusty Monopoly board somewhere or a
Clue.
Scrabble set that they kept at the lake.
Mhm.
But today, I mean, even looking in my own cabinet, I've got 50 plus board games sitting in there of all styles.
Is that
And
because
how
of the internet? Is that because of the internet? Is that because people are able to make things and have like a direct relationship instead of having to be a big company?
Kickstarter definitely helped with that aspect. But just the hobby itself has really exploded in the last several years. It used to be that there were a publisher they would come out with 2, maybe 3 games a year and just really focus on those games, whether they're good or not, and then hope that they sell really well. Well, with the advent of Kickstarter, a lot of designers are saying, hey, I got a good idea. And then they throw something together and they throw it on Kickstarter. And a bunch of people are like, yeah, that sounds cool. I will give you some money to make it. And so then they make it. And so now it used to be where maybe 100 new games would come out in a year. Now there's like 1,000 new games a year. Now, that's all taking into consideration the fact that you're not going to see the bulk of these games. Some of these games are very limited release and that you'll really only get if you backed it on Kickstarter or have a hookup somewhere where somebody could get their hands on this game. There's a lot of games that you may never see or play.
Right.
I think if we go back to the beginning of board game history, without a doubt, the first mainstream game that captivated from, coast to coast, continent to continent is chess. Chess is the granddaddy of all board games, and probably the reason why they're referred to as board games because you had a chess board you played on.
Mm-hmm.
Actual plank of wood instead of mulch.
Yeah.
Correct. Or even just, nowadays it's so popular to have a board game that is just cards.
Right.
A deck building game like a Munchkin technically falls under the board game category, but you're playing it all with cards. Following chess, checkers. Probably the easiest board game to get into if you're going to play anything. And then right behind that, one of the oldest games in existence, estimated to be around 5,000 years old, is backgammon, which is a game that I remember us having in my home. You've got little tiny colored circles and some dice and a little dice thrower, but I have no friggin' idea how backgammon is played.
I didn't really know how to play backgammon either for a long time. I know we had a board. And then one of the computer games that my parents got at some point, they had backgammon on it. And so I was able to kind of learn how to play. And then when I worked for some group homes in Valley City, there was a guy who loved playing backgammon. So I played games over and over again. And he'd always go, when he would win, he said, all right, I'm on a roll. And then I'd say, that's your first one that you've won. We've played like 6 games. And then he would say, well, it's a good thing about having a head injury. You don't remember when you lose.
That
was a bad story.
No, that's all right. It's a good.
It's tough. It's tough when we're not looking each other in the face,
Yeah.
Yeah. Your enthusiasm really sells it, Phil.
Sure.
I used to play a game that my mom loved called my mums called Mancala. Did you guys ever play Mancala?
Oh, yeah, Mancala.
You had a long board that had, I think, 6 slots in front of you and 6 slots in front of your opponent, and then kind of a dish at either end.
Mhm.
And you had to like you'd pull a number of gems out of one of your slots and then deposit it one apiece going around. And the goal was to get all of your gems out of this deal. I hated that game. Everything
It's a
about
tough
it
game.
bothered me. Yeah, because you think you're on a roll, then all of a sudden you found out you got outgamed by your younger sister.
Yeah.
And it was in front of everyone else at your lake cabin, and you went to pout, and all you could do is sit in the woods, and then you got poison oak. Everyone can relate to that story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Word for word.
I
Step
thought
by
so.
step.
So we get to the point of where board games start to diverge, and that is thanks to 2 gentlemen and then their arch nemesis, the Parker brothers and then Milton Bradley, board game makers who figured out the clue is mass marketing when it comes to board games, if we're kind of walking through board game history. So you take something like Monopoly,
Huge game.
a huge game. And I think you're hard pressed to find a house that doesn't have a Monopoly game somewhere. It may not be a full game. It might be missing some of the houses or hotels, but maybe you are a house that has one of those old ones that you got from your grandmother's that still has the lead painted houses made out of wood.
Right. There's so many copies of Monopoly in this country that Monopoly has basically kind of become shorthand like for board game. Like it's sort of like the first one that comes up in conversation. It's probably the most popular in pop culture.
Right.
And
You want
that's
to play a
what-
game? Monopoly.
Yeah. And that's what turns a lot of people off when you say, hey, anybody want to play a board game? Because that's one of the first things that they think of is Monopoly. And how many times have people played Monopoly and think, I don't want to sit for 5 hours just to lose.
That and Risk seem to have kind of similar sentiments when it comes to that. Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I played Risk, not to take us off of Monopoly too quickly.
No, go for it.
First time I played Risk, it was the worst thing that could have happened. I won. And I won in just a clear sweep. And it was mostly luck, because there's dice rolls and there's different ways you can kind of get lucky. But I won. And then I just thought, I must be really good at this game.
Did you have Asia?
This was so long ago, I can't even remember what I had. I don't think I had Asia originally. No. But
because that's a good way to lose.
I know I won. And then I just thought, this is going to be amazing. And I've been chasing that dragon ever since. It's too hard for me to play Risk now, not because the game is so long, but because I'm afraid I'm not going to win again.
An interesting fact about Risk is Risk came to life in the late 1950s, and it had been a game that had been designed and they were trying to get it built and mass produced, but the horrors of World War II were so fresh in people's minds that it took that 15 years after the end of World War II for people to be like, okay, I think that I can play a game based on world domination again and be okay with it. And, in Risk as a gameplay style laid the groundwork for other games based around world domination, like Axis and Allies, Twilight Struggle, which are huge games today.
Yeah. Twilight Struggle is one of the highest rated games on BoardGameGeek.com.
We haven't even touched on the trivia based games or the party based games yet. So something like Trivial Pursuit becomes there was an annual, torture that took place on Christmas Day on the Gordon family Christmas Day celebration chart, where somebody would get a board game and we would have to play it. That was part of the rules.
That sounds like the Godel family Christmas.
Well, you guys probably took the time to learn the rules and had fun playing it. What we would do is I would sit there being like, I don't know any of the answers in this 1950s doo-wop music trivia game. So it's not very fun for JJ. I'll have another piece of Lefse. Thank you very much. But so the trivia based board games are big, and I really think that those type of games, while they still use a board, were kind of the beginning of this me versus you with aspects I can control in real life versus moving a tank around on a board.
Yeah.
I feel like Trivial Pursuit is closer to Cards Against Humanity than say like Life is, only in the fact that you play the person in Trivial Pursuit. If I know that Phil is bad at sports trivia, I want him to land on the yellow every single time, so that keeps his pie away. Versus
unless you have a specialized board game of Trivial Pursuit like the Star Wars.
Right. But I mean, really, we didn't start seeing those until the mid to late 90s. And really, so that's the other aspect of board games is once intellectual properties began licensing themselves out, all of a sudden, you no longer had just Pictionary. You had Pictionary Simpsons. You had Pictionary Sex and the City. And
that's really what made Monopoly blow up so much.
I think so, too.
Because everybody knew how to play Monopoly and they were bored with it. Well, what are we going to do to get people to get more Monopoly? Oh, let's do a Star Wars version of Monopoly. And then people buy it because they're cool about Star Wars. They rip it open. They're like, oh, let's play it. It's just Monopoly. We hate Monopoly, but it's got Star Wars. I want to own the Death Star.
JJ, how many variations of Monopoly are in? We've heard of Phil's game storage area. Can you explain a little bit more if we were to look at your game storage area? And can you also illustrate maybe how many variations of Monopoly you have?
Sure. So I'm looking in my cupboard right now. So I have two cupboards. One is, I'm going to say 5 feet tall by 4 feet wide. And then the other one is 3 feet tall by 4 feet wide. So the separation simply means puzzles go on the bottom, and I have a good collection of puzzles, and then board games on top. Now, mixed in with the board games are also decks of cards and sets of dice, everything from D20s for Dungeons and Dragons, all the way to just regular 6-sided dice. I own Fargo-opoly, which is a Monopoly game themed around Fargo that has a horrible misprint on it. Just tragically awful. I was playing this during a celebrity Monopoly tournament recently, and instead of having the railroads, they have popular streets in Fargo. Okay. And so University Drive, Broadway, 19th Avenue North, and then on the top, that would normally be B&O Railroad, they have 23rd Avenue. And I thought, the hell is 23rd Avenue? So I look it up on Google Maps. There's nothing great about it. And I'm really trying to think, what are they doing? I'm like, oh my God.
It's a real scandal.
Well, here's the deal.
Real scandal.
They obviously meant for it to be 32nd Avenue. And some idiot wrote it down wrong. And now there's something like 60,000 copies of this game printed. I went to a Walmart recently in our town, and they had an entire shelf full of Fargo-opolis that all tout like, go to your favorite places, the Fargo Dome, NDSU, 23rd Avenue. What? And there's nothing on 23rd Avenue.
There is a 23rd Avenue in South Fargo, according to Google Maps.
There is, and is there anything notable on it?
Nothing notable. I mean,
right.
it's just a residential street.
Yep.
All the people who don't live in Fargo who get this game, they're going to come to Fargo and go, "Oh, I got to go to this 23rd Avenue and check it out." They'll be so disappointed.
My board game collection also includes a lot of movie trivia. So the game Seen It, I've got in there.
I have
a couple of loaded questions for movies.
I have a Seinfeld version of Seen It, I think, somewhere, but I think that might be more in a storage area. I do have the Simpsons version of Monopoly, the Simpsons version of Clue, a Simpsons trivia game. Yeah. Some of that stuff you'd never play anymore, but
some people, I think, have multiple copies of a certain game because they love it so much, or they update it over time. For me, it's categories. I have 6 editions of Categories.
I love categories.
It's great because Categories is a game. If you've never played it, it's simple. Everyone gets a list, and it's a list with prompts, things that start with 4-letter words that start with this letter, or things you find at a beach. And you roll this die that has all these letters on it, and it's R, let's say. You roll an R. Everyone has to fill out on this sheet the same exact categories with R. So name a president that starts with R. You would put Ronald Reagan, for example. But if both
Roosevelt.
if both Phil and I put Ronald Reagan, neither of us get points. If I say Reagan and Phil says Roosevelt, we each get a point for that. And then it becomes this thing that you argue about because
Right.
Oh, yeah.
you have to have the group decide. And I remember recently having to weigh in on whether or not albino is a score word for things found at the beach. And the person arguing said, I think that you could probably find an albino at the beach. And the person arguing it goes, you can't just put anything. You just can't put anything you want out there. You've got to have some semblance.
It sounds like it violates the spirit of the law.
Yeah. If you go to any beach, would you find an albino? I mean, if you go to a beach, you might find an albino, but you don't go to a beach going, oh, I need to find an albino. I'm going to go to a beach. You know?
So my ruling on it, and because I got to be the decider, my favorite part of Categories is being the decider. My decision was is based on the fact of like, there is no way an albino seeks out the beach. Their fair skin is not meant for that type of activity. And I said, point. I am going to give you the point to the person who said no way, because that is a sound argument. Now, if the other person had said, I'm going to say that you're going to find an albino at the beach because they want to prove to everyone that they can be a part of every social interaction, every social space that everyone else can be, I probably would have given them the point instead.
You know what's funny is like this kind of argument, you would not expect it to be in any sort of like board or tabletop game where typically the rules are pretty well defined. This is kind of the thing that happens in a lot of role-playing games where you're trying to adjudicate exactly the meaning or spirit of a rule versus it just being absolutely clear 100%, this beats that.
And
Now,
that's one of those things about party games, because I would consider Categories a party game where
correct.
There could be, you could be right or wrong, but being as part of the party, kind of the same thing with code names. There's some gray area where you can say some certain things and get away with it, but other things that you can't.
Don't you kind of wish, like in real life, you had a code name that you went by?
How do you know I don't?
I'm really good at giving nicknames. Do you want me to figure one out for you, Tucker?
Well, I mean, I don't think you should ask for one. I think it needs to be bestowed upon you. But like, that's just so cool, right? To have like another name.
There used to be a member of our comedy troupe who got nicknamed Flamingo. And it wasn't something that was like, I want a nickname. Okay, Flamingo. He was very, very flustered once when a flamingo chased him at the Flamingo in Las Vegas. And we're like, yep, that one's going to stick.
I got nicknamed.
Oh, keep going.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. I was part of we didn't meet frequently, but we did some paintballing, and I joined them for a couple rounds.
I don't know why that's making me laugh.
Everybody had a code name, a nickname, and they nicknamed me Joker because I was part of the line benders and I make people laugh.
You owe me some money for that, then.
I'll give you some paintballs.
Phil, you've got a nickname, or I guess a code name that you probably don't know exists, but my mother gave you a code name at one point.
Really?
When she would be talking with her friends and she would mention, I was with JJ today and we ran into Phil. And they would say, which Phil? Because, of course, there's you. And then there's also other Phil, who's been a previous guest of this. And so she nicknamed you Good Phil and the other one Bad Phil. And so there is a whole pocket of people in this town who know you as Good Phil.
Good Phil.
Yep. And so if it's not you, they're like, oh, it was Bad Phil then. Bad Phil.
Is it because I didn't pee in your closet?
Yeah, probably.
I mean, that's one list. That's one amongst many
Yeah.
many infractions made by Bad Phil. I like the notion that the two Phils are a duality.
The funny thing is that
one walks in the light, the other walks in darkness.
Usually the good person is clean shaven and the bad one has a goatee or beard. Just the opposite for us Phils. I usually have facial hair and Bad Phil does not.
Wah, wah, wah. Okay, so back to board games.
Yes.
just to get this out of there. Phil, what's the most expensive board game you own? Because I'm looking at my most expensive and I paid $102 for this one.
Holy cow. I paid $75 for Mechs versus Minions, which is a League of Legends board game. It's themed on League of Legends. You don't have to have any knowledge of League of Legends to play it, but you get a little, wink and a nod if you do know a little bit about League of Legends. But it's a just straight out board game, and I paid $75 for it. And I'm not disappointed at all because it is a really fun game. What game was yours?
I got into a Kickstart for IDW, which is a pretty popular board game manufacturer. They were doing one for a limited edition Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. And so I bought that. It was $102, which included shipping. And it's all right. I don't think it's $102 worth. But that's part of the Renaissance, right? So you can go and pick up a Monopoly board, a standard Monopoly board at a thrift store for, probably $4. And even if it doesn't have all the pieces, there's enough resources out there where you just, write up a little recipe card with the information you need if you don't have Pennsylvania Avenue as a property in there, and you're good to go. In fact, I should also mention one of the most popular board games in prisons is Scrabble, because they just take a piece of cardboard and they grid out the cardboard, and they make the letters out of cardboard as well with a pen. So you can create the entire game just with things that you can find around the house. So the threshold for that one is really low.
And Scrabble is a pretty good game too.
Especially if you got a great vocabulary.
Oh yeah. And I've always had a pretty good vocabulary, and I could spell pretty well. Also, I mean, you remember, I don't know how long ago it was, but I feel like it was at least like 7 years ago when there was a huge upswing in Words with Friends. It's just Scrabble. Everybody was playing Words with Friends, and it was just a digital version of Scrabble. People were playing it on Facebook, on their phones, anywhere that they could, and just tons of people were playing it. I kind of feel bad for the Scrabble people because they pretty much just took their game and ran with it. But now there's a Scrabble version that you could get on your phone.
And this move to a digital platform, which I think is the tough jump, and a lot of board games didn't want to get into that right off the bat because you want someone to buy the board game. You're always going to make more money with a traditional board game by selling it and giving to someone, until they realized we can do simple things like have in-app purchases. So if you're playing Monopoly and the computer's about to beat you, for an extra $2 of digital currency, we will gladly give you some more money so you can keep playing on. And I think that's been part of the key, but I have yet to find a great app of a board game, a popular board game, that is fun to play with other people who have the same app. My sister and I have tried a Monopoly game that you connect via Bluetooth to another phone and play. And it's all right. It's not great. It's just all right. I've tried the Scattergories app, and it's not fantastic either. I just don't think that we've mastered the idea of something that's meant to be played with other people for the most part and put it into an application.
Well,
I'm sure that kind of depends on the game too, right?
Yeah.
Some games are going to lend themselves more easily to others. Because I was really big into, I think it was called Trivia Crack, or no, Trivia.
Oh yeah.
It just
Trivia
Crack.
Crack.
Yeah, Trivia Crack. It had its own big blow up, kind of like Words with Friends did.
Yeah.
And I would have fun challenging friends to that game.
And
But that was the kind of game though where you both don't need to be sitting in real time playing, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm going to make a move, and then when you get around to it, you make a move, and then when I get around to it, I make a move. The experience is just so different from when you're actually playing with someone in real time and sort of giving your whole focus to the game.
Tucker, I agree with you, but I think that, to my point, Trivia Crack isn't the Trivial Pursuit game that they've turned into an app. They designed a game using elements from Trivial Pursuit and created something new. I think if they launched a Trivial Pursuit game, everyone would hate everybody because all you would do is play it in front of the computer so you could Google the answers and cheat, which I still think some people do when they played Trivia Crack or played it with a group of people and being like, hey, what's the name of the pineapple company from Hawaii? Dole?
Right.
Okay, yeah, okay, good.
Not to throw myself under the bus, but for a long time I've always been really good at like naming a tune. Like, oh, hey, what's that song, Phil? And sometimes my brothers will send me some lyrics of like a song that they hear or something. And they'll go, hey, Phil, what is that song? And sometimes I'm like, I don't know. I just Google it and then I tell them and they're like, oh, man, you're so good at that.
You heard it here, folks.
Are you confessing to this? Is that what you're saying? You're letting your family know for the first time that you've been living a lie?
I don't think Eric or Nate listen to JJ Meets World, but Mom and Dad probably will. They'll keep my secret.
But like, what if we directly message them with a link to this episode?
No,
well, I want to keep. I want to keep you.
Then they won't give me their stupid questions and just Google it themselves.
I want to help keep the lie alive as well. So I'm not actually
that's cool.
You like that.
That's funny.
But if TMZ picks this up, it's not our fault.
So one of my favorite party games as of recently is a game that ruins friendships. And it's also something that I have to keep at the back of my game closet because if people see it, there's a lot of questions immediately. Phil, can you guess what game I'm talking about? We just played it at your house.
Was it Trial by Trolley?
Nope.
That's the new one.
Secret Hitler.
Oh, Secret Hitler.
The premise of the board game Secret Hitler is everyone is given an envelope, and inside of that envelope it tells you whether you are a fascist or not. And you're not supposed to let people know what alignment you are. And throughout the game, you have to continue doing things sort of in secret where only two people at the table know what's written on a particular card. And so if I say on this card, it says this, and the other person says something contradictory, you have to decide, is JJ working against us or is this other person working against us? The whole game is based around yelling at each other, and one person at the table is a secret Hitler. And you you want to identify that person and figure out who they are before you pass enough of these pieces of legislation to allow the fascists to win. Now, just like the movie Jojo Rabbit, I have the damnedest time getting someone to play this game because it sounds like something that's going to get you put on a list somewhere and ruin your chances for a promotion at one point. But the game itself is so much fun.
It's a lot of fun. It's one of the newer games that use the social deduction mechanic. The first one that I was aware of that used that same thing where there's a couple people around the table are spies and then the rest are resistance, and that's the name of the game, The Resistance. And it kind of has a theme of, I don't want to say Star Wars, but it's a futuristic type theme, and you're part of the resistance, but there's spies among you, and you're trying to go on missions, and whether it succeeds or fails. There's a couple different gameplay mechanics that Secret Hitler has that the resistance doesn't, but for the most part, it's the same thing. There's a couple other games called like Werewolf or One Night Werewolf, One Night Vampire. There's a couple social deduction games out there, but Secret Hitler is a fun one and definitely makes eyebrows raise when somebody pulls that off and say, hey, anybody want to play this?
Another great one that I've really enjoyed as of late is using the intellectual property side of things. The Harry Potter deck building game. Phil and I broke it out on the night of the Golden Globes. And a deck building game works like this. You are constantly pulling cards and building a deck of cards that have different skills and abilities that you use either against each other or against a common enemy played through the board and other mechanics. It is such a unique thing because I'm such a big Harry Potter fan myself. I love those books. I love the movies. And so being able to play in that world is something that I feel is really special. And I think that those IPs have changed the way board games have kind of functioned. In the 80s, if you had a popular movie, you had two things that were guaranteed. Number one, some kind of a breakfast cereal for children and a board game ripoff of whatever your movie is. There's a Gremlins board game. There's a Miami Vice board game.
I own it.
Do you really?
Yeah, I own it. I bought it at a garage sale for like a quarter.
See,
Wow.
There you go.
It's awful. It is an awful
There's
game.
a Dune board game after it came out. I think I don't know if it came out before or after the movie back in the 80s, but it's based on the Frank Herbert novels Dune, and it just recently it was in IP hell for a while. It finally got kind of a rebranding, or not rebranding, but refresh and update and a new release. My brother got it for Christmas.
Apparently there is also like an ET board game that is just as bad as the ET video game that came out for Atari.
Oof.
So I think that that's part of the fun with board games nowadays. So if you take a pretty basic setup of a board game and you just attach additional intellectual properties, like for example, like I'm sure that there's an X-Men board game out there that would be a lot of fun to play.
I've what my absolute favorite board game of all time is an X-Men board game called Uncanny X-Men Alert. And there are at least two of this particular style that are they both come with like 15 little plastic figurines that are each of the X-Men characters. And then there's like a board that you play them on. And I've got one of the two games. The other one, I think it's called Siege or something like that. These are like early 90s. These would have come out probably around the time that the cartoon started. Maybe, I'm not quite sure. I would assume that it was the same X-Men craze. And it's a really simple game, but my favorite thing about it was that in it there's the action figure pieces for each superhero. There's a ton of them, and they're gray, but if you wanted, you could always paint them. I never actually painted them. And then you've got the board, and there's all these battle zones that they're going to do battle on, and then they're going to fight bad guys, and the bad guys each have a card, and the card has stats on it. And so it was almost like this board game also came with a deck of like 40 supervillain trading cards that I thought were really, really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
So in the same way, a lot of the kids in the 90s who really got into comic books, the way that we were able to learn about most of the characters that we know about is because of trading cards. It wasn't because of the comics.
That's how I learned.
We couldn't afford the comic books. There's just way too many of them. So that's why they made the trading cards, basically, was to like get us in more and get some more money out of us. And this board game basically did the same thing for me. So it was really cool.
JJ, you really dug the Harry Potter deck building game. So there is a huge, well, not a huge game, but there's a game that has a lot of content called Legendary, Marvel Legendary. And my brother has it, and your deck building a deck just like in the Harry Potter one, but instead of like, hey, you get Alohomora as a spell, you get like little abilities and you build your own deck and you're fighting villains. My brother has it and he's got a bunch of different expansions. So he has the Fantastic Four expansion. He's got Dark City, which has like Daredevil and stuff like that. There's some extra X-Men stuff, but you could choose what heroes you're going to use in that you're going to be deck building with. And then you choose a main villain and a scheme and a deck of villain cards that you shuffle up and everything like that. It's pretty fun. There's also a new game that just came out last year called Marvel Champions, and it's a brand new one, so it doesn't quite have the content of Legendary, but it's really highly rated. One of the best ones that I've heard of that came out last year, and it's this new thing called a living card game where you go on specific missions with your champion. And you just keep playing through that, and there's more missions slowly coming out, and yeah. So that intellectual property is huge.
That's part of the thing nowadays. You invest, let's say, $50 into one of these board games, and it's not just single play and you're done. You can play through a storyline, and then you can play through a different storyline. Or the fact of the matter is, expansions are huge business. I look at everything from the Munchkin series, which is you battle your friends. There's a Munchkin for just about anything that you love, from Harry Potter to Marvel to The Walking Dead and so on and so forth. That they're also putting out. So if I own Marvel Munchkin, they'll put out a Marvel Munchkin expansion pack, which will have a collection of additional cards and villains and effects that go on. And I find that so unique, because for so long, if you, like I said, if you owned a Game of Life, you only needed one copy of that game for a household, and you're good for 50 years. There was no updates to the game. You just played the same game over and over and over again, and the happenstance of the roll of the dice decided your fate. And at the end, there's a single winner, versus this world where you can buy an expansion pack and things can change in a heartbeat. And just because somebody has figured out the mechanics of a game doesn't mean that they'll have that ultimate knowledge once the expansion comes out.
On top of that, there's games out now called legacy games. And think of like playing a video game. You get through your storyline of the video game, and then when you're done, you're basically done with that video game. Sure, you could play it over, but you know where things are. It's easier to play. It's not as challenging because you know what's coming up. Well, they got games. Gloomhaven is the big one, where it's once you are done, you essentially can throw it away because you've played through all the content of that game and there's no surprises. But it's just surprising to me because when I get a game, I want to keep it. I don't want to rip up a card. But that's what they say in that game is, hey, once you've played this card, rip it up. You don't use it anymore. Now, I know there's plenty of people who don't do that they think, well, maybe I'll play it again at some point. But with the amount of content in Gloomhaven itself, it's hard for me to imagine somebody trying to replay through everything again.
So Phil, here are a couple of major board games that I'm sure you've played that I've never even touched. One of them is a Catan. Is that how you say it?
Settlers of Catan. Well,
so that's a game that's
rebranded
huge.
just as Catan. It's a very popular game. I don't specifically know what game came out first, but that was the first game that came out that hit my radar that made me go, oh, there's a lot of other different kind of games. It's probably one of the most popular Euro style games out there. And yeah, I've played it. I've got the 2 expansions of it, Seafarers of Catan and Cities and Knights of Catan. And you need the base Settlers of Catan to play those expansions.
what did you say? Did you say Euro style gaming? Is that what you
Euro
said?
style gaming. Yep.
What is
a
that? What does
Euro
that mean?
game. There's nicknames for different kinds of games. A game like Scattergories is like a party game. Monopoly or Risk or Clue is nicknamed Ameritrash. Believe it or not. Euro style or a Euro game is a lot more strategy based, where you're not rolling a dice and moving around a board. You are strategically deciding, I am going to take this movement and gather this resources and build stuff. It's more of you're trying to build something instead of cross the finish line or have the most money and make everybody else go bankrupt. And there's usually a clear set of goals. Like you win the game by having the most amount of victory points after 10 rounds.
What about the game Ticket to Ride?
That's a great one. If there's anybody out there that is unsure whether they want to try to move into more strategic games, Ticket to Ride is one of the best gateway games into a different style of board game. And yeah, it's very fun. In fact, you were saying that you haven't found a good app. There's a Ticket to Ride app. Now you got to pay for it, of course, but it's a great game. It's very simple. You get a card that says, hey, make essentially like connect this city to that city using your trains, and you get a certain amount of victory points. And then you on the board, there's different colors, and you keep drawing cards when it's your turn, and you just fill up the board, and you get blocked by your asshole sister-in-law.
How do you really feel, Phil?
One does not simply beat Kali in Ticket to Ride. It's ridiculous.
There are two games that I know are very popular.
For it. Yeah, and they're really solid games. They're fun, and if you're unsure, if you want to get into the more expansive, really crazy strategic games, try Catan, try Ticket to Ride. Those are great games that might lead you down the rabbit hole of what else is out there.
What
else you got for me?
Well, okay, so what other games have we not talked about that people might want to put into their Amazon queue, or more importantly, go to their local game shop and purchase? I think that is one other big part of board games, that if you want something that is a little off the beaten path, going to your local game store, whether it's a comic book store that also sells games, you have a specific game store. I make a stop whenever I'm in Minneapolis at Games by James in the Mall of America. It's a very fun store. I always have a great time there. But what have we not talked about that are games that you are currently
is there
really
like a commercial where they're like, is there like a commercial where they're like, what is it? Games by James?
Yep.
So is it like, here at Games by James, James buys games?
You've heard of our fames. We're Games by James.
They're not all the sames.
We don't have any dames because we just have games. It'd be a real shames if you don't stop by Games by James.
Yeah,
and
basically.
They're not lames. Probably the best board game of all time. And at the beginning of the game, you don't have to do anything. The winner is determined. Candyland.
Yeah, in fact, it's funny you say that, because previous guest Alex Davey on the episode we had with him, where he talks about designing a Star Wars board game.
Yeah.
Yep.
He talks about how there's no better lesson in predestiny than the fact that a game of Candyland is decided before you even flip the first card.
You could be up against a potato and just you flip the cards, move the piece for it. The potato could beat you.
Right. Your odds when playing a potato in Candyland is the same as playing Elon Musk.
Yes. Gosh, I don't know. Because there's a lot of really good games out there. It's hard for me to just zoom in on another one. Although, I mentioned this one before. It's a fun mechanic that I like and very easy to play. I mean, a game, the hardest part about it is just calculating your points at the end, although there's a great calculating app for it called Sushi Go. You can find that actually even at Target if you want. Sushi Go is a fun game. A game that I really like that I played a lot of, it's a worker placement game called Lords of Waterdeep. And it's a Dungeons and Dragons theme, but really the theme is just there to be the theme. It's a worker placement game where you have some the tile that you use to signify your worker is called a meeple. And you move your meeple onto a specific area on the board and you collect those resources. You spend those resources to do quests and you gain victory points and rewards off of those quests. And I've played that one a lot. Probably just because it's a lot of fun and my dad would actually win it every once in a while and he has a hard time beating us at any other game. So he likes playing that one.
Are there any games where you're like, nope, not having it? For
Axis and
example,
Allies.
Really?
I do.
That was a quick answer.
Oh yeah, that's my go-to. I never wanted to play Axis and Allies again. My brother and brother-in-law and some friends they really loved Axis and Allies, and so I was like, okay, sure, I'll play it. And so I had the unfortunate thing where they all knew what was going on and how to play. And I was just kind of like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. And they were like, oh, you just be Russia. You know, that's the easy one to play. And I'm like, all right, so I guess I'll invade Germany. And they're like, yeah, you want to do that. And so I invaded Germany and then Germany pushed back. And I played Axis and Allies a number of times. And to me, it felt like every game was the same. You start with Russia. You try to hurt Germany a little bit to slow them down. Germany will always kick your butt back. And then the English, they just work on their navy. And then Japan will bomb the US and then the US will bomb back. And it always felt like every game was exactly the same, with the exception of every once in a while, the dice roll would just kick you in the ass and it would suck. But there was a few times when I played and I was just like, I just could not get into it. And I didn't see what my brother really enjoyed about it. One of the updated versions had a couple extra special aspects to it. And I enjoyed that one a little bit better because it changed up the monotony of it, but it was still just kind of Axis and Allies. And I just couldn't get into it.
You're dead to me, Phil. You're dead to me.
I didn't realize that you were such an Axis and Allies fan, JJ.
I'm not, but I love any game where Phil loses because I've waited 50 minutes to talk about this. Playing a board game with Phil is one of the most frustrating things in the entire world. And I'll tell you 3 reasons why. Reason number 1.
And I'll probably agree with these.
Yeah, he's insanely good at board games. Phil has a mind that it doesn't matter what style of game it is. Phil's brain is wired for these games. Some people know everything there is about astrology. Other people know how to make a car engine go from not starting to firing on all cylinders. Phil Godel can play the heck out of a board game. Reason number 1. Reason number 2, Phil is a horrible loser. Horrible loser. If you ever start to beat Phil in a game, and I think I've only beaten Phil once in a game, and I can tell you specifically was I was playing the Queen of Hearts in Villainous, and I beat Phil, and he was very frustrated. And I think it's only because it was the first time he had ever played that game, so right. I can never play him again. And reason number 3, Phil is a stickler for the rules. I feel, if I'm not mistaken, would I be correct in saying that the rules are not meant to be broken, especially in the world of board games?
Oh, correct. They are there for a reason. Now, if you make a determination at the beginning that, hey, we're going to play it this way, like in Settlers of Catan, there is a piece on the board called the robber, and when you roll a 7, that robber, you're supposed to move it, blocking the resource gathering of that, and you're supposed to steal a card from one of your opponents that is next to that robber. We have a house rule for my dad, because dad hates the robber, that if you go to that, wherever you move the robber, you can just gain that resource from the bank. You don't actually steal from a human player, just to make it a little more nice. But some of that, it's just humoring dad and everything like that. But there are some aspects where I'm like, wait, is that right? I don't know. Well, let me check the rule book. Yep, you can do that.
And
I just had a flashback to the cones of Dunshire.
Yeah. And the lowly farmer. And that's the thing is, Phil, any game you play, at one point or another, Phil's like, hand me the rules. Hand me the rule book.
Yeah.
And he looks at it, and then he wants to shut down everyone else's fun and good fortune. But sometimes, and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong again, I bet you read the rules and there's a thing where you see like, oh, this actually works out in my favor. I just won't bring it to everyone's attention.
Oh.
No, I'm usually pretty good about that. If I go through the trouble of looking it up and I'm wrong, I'm like, shit, I shouldn't have looked it up, but it's better that I play right. And so I give it to you. But if I'm unsure of it, and I don't look at the rules, then it's fair game. But if you try that on me, I want to know if you're doing it right.
Sure.
So I'll look it up.
Because you want to win.
I want to win.
To win it. What happens when you play children, Phil? I mean, if you're playing like Chutes and Ladders with some kids, are you going to make sure to teach them a lesson about the cruelty of the world?
What's funny, the last couple times I go visit my friend Kayla in Castleton fairly frequently, and she's got a 7-year-old son, almost 8 years old, and I brought Sushi Go over there the last couple times. He hasn't won yet. but I
don't like it when Phil comes over.
But I did give him the board game. And it's very similar to Yahtzee in a way. It's called King of Tokyo, and he's beaten me that more than I've beaten him. So, it's good to give them the taste of victory, just so that I could rub it in their faces when I win.
Interesting.
JJ, we know what game he will never ever play, but to you, what is the mayo and mustard of board games?
Oh, I think that it's a pretty easy discussion for me as well. I cannot stand, and I mean this in the case of like, if I am alone in a deserted cabin in the woods and Cindy Crawford is there with me and she's like, listen, let's not go anywhere. Let's wait out the storm. And I'll be like, all right, Cindy, sounds good. And she says, listen, I just happen to have my favorite board game with me. I think that you would really like to play it. And she pulls out Mousetrap. F that. Not going to happen. And here's why I can't stand Mousetrap. It is the most frustrating game in the world to set up, and it never works out the way you want it to. The mechanics of all those plastic pieces just don't work. I would also put Grape Escape on that same list, which was a popular game when I was a kid. It's like the Grape Escape. And it was the same thing where you would launch all these things and it would smush these little Play-Doh grapes that you had. Any game that takes so long to set up and the mechanics of these like ridiculous over the top pieces don't work. No, thank you. Not going to happen. I also, just because I don't have the patience, hate games like Kerplunk and Operation.
What about Pickup Sticks?
Oh, nope. Hate Pickup Sticks too. Hate it. Not going to play it. Never going to happen. They're just those things I don't have fun with. I can't get behind it because it's not about my skill in the game. It's about whether or not, my leg is too shaky at that moment. So I also don't think I like Twister because when you play Twister with a chubby kid, they're always like, oh God, I hope JJ doesn't fall on me. And I want to be like, screw you, Cindy.
You've got a lot of mustard games.
I do.
Yeah.
And it comes from just a lifetime of heartache is really what it comes at. Tucker, do you have any games that you don't play in particular?
Apples to apples. I hate apples to apples so much that anytime I hear someone suggest the game Apples to Apples, I literally begin to dislike that person.
Well,
It's
what
an
about
actual phenomenon.
What about if they suggest Cards Against Humanity? Because let's be honest,
I feel very
exactly the
similarly.
same.
Yep, I feel I basically feel the same way. Apples to Apples is just even worse. It really is. I mean, there's part of I get the premise of it. I just hate it so much. I just absolutely hate that game so much.
Do you know what I think?
Have you told your story on your? I can't remember if you've told it on JJ Meets World yet, but your bad experience of Apples to Apples with America.
I will gladly tell it right now.
Okay.
I have played Apples to Apples once in my entire life, and it was Thanksgiving several years ago. Now, I want to preface this with saying, I think the key to Apples, if you played it with complete strangers, that's the only way the game is fair. You're playing it with complete strangers who can't see your face because everyone's behind a curtain. There is no popularity that comes into it because your choice is not based solely on what you think is the best. It is based on what you think is the best, plus in addition of how much you like one of the people sitting at that table. So, for example, if it's Tucker and I sitting and playing this with, a bunch of bros from some dormitory somewhere, I'm probably going to side with Tucker more often than not. So that's my preface with this. It's Thanksgiving 2009. I am playing Apples to Apples at my sister's condo. Now, there's a good group of people with us. I've never played the game before, but I've heard of it. And I hear people love this Apples to Apples game. If you're not familiar, Apples to Apples is a simple game where a community dealer draws a card, and that card has some kind of a word or a short phrase, and you pick a card from your hand that you feel best represents what is on there. It's a connection.
I.e. the game is dumb as shit. It's basically, I put this word after this word. I mean, basically, people feel like they're writers all of a sudden because they put dandelion next to Anne Frank. They try to make some sort of they try to go for what's most messed up, and it just sort of deflates the whole thing.
So,
sorry to interrupt.
My sister is the dealer. No, it's good you say that because it really leads into like how angry I am about this still. My sister's the dealer, and she flips over the community card, which is patriotic. And in my hand, I have got the word eagle. And I think, slam dunk. I've got this one. I've got friggin' eagle in my hand, and she pulled patriotic. So I play it, and she's looking at all the cards, and we can't see what they are. And she's looking, she's like, there's two that are really good. I don't know. I can't choose. I can't choose. And so we made up a new rule on the spot, which is, well, we'll let each person say what they feel and go for it. And I'm like, oh man, someone must have had American flag or president or George Washington, something on there that could rival my eagle. So she says, okay, here's the first one, and it's eagle. And I plead my case. The eagle, it's our national bird. We have it on our money. I can't think of a single time when people don't tear up when someone's singing the national anthem and an eagle lands on a flagpole.
When that happens.
These are the magical moments that make you patriotic and proud to be an American. And she goes, that's really good. The next card that she flips over, the two that she's having trouble deciding behind, is Eagle and NASCAR. And her friend Megan is the one who played NASCAR. And Megan's answer to this was, well, unless you've been like in the pit down there, you really don't know how amazing it is. And people love America who love NASCAR. And everyone's got a flag. And I'm like, yeah, and some of them are like the Confederate flag. I don't feel like patriotic is the word. Do you understand what patriotic means? And my sister is telling me, because she went to a NASCAR rally when she was in Las Vegas once, that you really have to be there to understand what's going on. And I couldn't believe it. I got up from the table and I said, are you full of shit? There is no way that you are having trouble deciding between Eagle and goddamn NASCAR when it comes to goddamn patriotic. And she chose NASCAR.
Do you think you reacted like that because you got the message that she favors her friend more than you?
I think that's part of it. Also, I was just really worried that my sister completely does not understand. Like, she identifies more with the NASCAR group, and I'm like, listen, you pull down the leather pants of all of those NASCAR people, and I guarantee 2 out of 3 tattoos involve an eagle.
Pull down their leather pants.
You know, they got an eagle tattooed right on their ass.
Yeah, you know what, JJ? Just for scientific curiosity, could you please describe to us what you believe a standard NASCAR fan is dressed like?
Sure. No t-shirt, but there is a vest of some kind. And that's for both men and women.
It's got to be a jean vest.
It could be a jean vest. I mean, really, pleather, I also feel like, depending on what part of the country the rally's happening in. They are wearing
for the vegans.
Yep, they're wearing sunglasses whether they need to or not. There is
Baseball
a lot
cap?
of no. Oh God, no. Oh no, these are do-rag people, 100%. And their pants are not sized right, so they're always
denim as
a little. Yeah, they're either too tight or too loose. Nobody has the right amount of pants. And sometimes the pants are clipped to the vest into makeshift sort of overalls. And they are wearing boots of some kind. They could be army boots or cowboy boots.
Confusing them with Ghostbusters or anything else?
No, I'm positive, because these NASCAR fans don't service anyone at all, whereas a Ghostbuster is ridding your home of ghosts. And lastly, but certainly not least, they always have a little bit of whatever they last ate on their upper lip. That to me is the average NASCAR fan. But
and an eagle tattoo.
And an eagle tattoo. They love
under
America.
their leather pants.
Don't get me wrong. They love America, but they don't love everyone in America. They only love certain people in America. And that's why I feel like the eagle will shit on anybody. It does not discriminate. Lest we forget, at one point, there was a discussion of, okay, should we make the turkey the national bird or the eagle? And everyone's like, Ben Franklin, go back to your French soiled doves. And we're not going to use the turkey as our national bird. The turkey's stupid. What represents America? The eagle. The majestic eagle.
What eagle, though? Because there's lots of different types of eagles. Only one particular eagle would be associated with American patriotism.
Do you think you could put two eagles together and decipher which one's a bald eagle versus just a run-of-the-mill eagle?
If you don't think you can, I think the public school system failed you.
I think when people think of eagle, they think of a bald eagle first, though. Also,
right.
do you think they decided whether it should be eagle or turkey based on the deliciousness factor?
I think it's because of how badass it looked.
All swooping down,
probably. But I'd imagine that there might have been a dinner table somewhere where they're like, "Well, let's taste which one tastes better." And the turkey was definitely better tasting than the eagle. So they're like, "Well, we don't want to not eat turkey." So
right, I guess if you think more of an eagle is a raptor, right? It's a bird of prey versus a turkey, which is just basically food.
Yeah.
the eagle itself is the most majestic of all the birds, which is why they invented a fake version of it for the Rescuers Down Under, the sequel to the original Rescuers, where
a superior movie.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Agreed.
What the hell is the name of that eagle? Like Miyagatu. Marahote. Thank you, Phil. The great golden eagle. And the little boy gets to ride on the golden eagle and have a great time.
I so wanted to ride on an eagle after that.
Yeah, it takes him water skiing. And so to me, the eagle is just where it's at. It's got those awesome claws. Oh, I love eagles. I love eagles so much. So
you're so into eagles. Maybe you should play the board game Wingspan.
What?
Seriously. It's a very popular new game. Came out just a little over a year ago now. It was like January of last year. And it's called Wingspan, and you collect birds, and it's really fun, actually. I think you would like it.
Well, thank you very much for that, Phil. I did not know that there was even a board game based around birds, but it's good to know. Now we know it.
Have you guys ever played any board games around fishing? Because there are those, and those are actually a lot of fun.
I've played that one based for kids where it's a little fish coming up and trying to eat it.
I was thinking of the same thing.
Right. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's failing me right now. But when we were kids, there was a board game like for bass fishing. And so the board showed you this giant lake. And I forget exactly how the game played out, but it was a ton of fun.
Oh, and so like where you would just like pick squares and then find out if there's something underneath it?
Well, it was something to do with like how often you like where you could go in the lake, and certain areas you would have better chances of drawing cards where you would catch better fish. And so I think you were basically racing against the other players to try and get the most fish. There, and I'm just Googling right now, and while I can't find mine, I'm seeing like 10 or 15 different games that are very, very similar.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's a whole genre of fishing board games.
For example, there's Take the Bait, a light Euro-style tile collection game featuring teams of 4 whimsical fishermen competing to bring in the biggest catch. So
how about
I think
Fishing Time? Fishing Time. That was the game. Fishing Time. The Great American Fishing Challenge.
Lest you not forget, Go Fish. Classic card game.
At what point do you say like
Not
a card
really.
game and a board game are different? Like I would never consider Tripoli a board game, even though you have a board that you play with.
I would say the big difference is if you're using a standard deck of cards, that would be considered a card game. You are creating a game based on cards that you already have, your basic standard deck of cards. Whereas a board game, yeah, you may have cards, but each card is specialized specifically for that game that you would not necessarily play solitaire or cribbage with.
Gotcha.
That's what I think anyway. I don't know if that's what the main thing is, but that's how I kind of consider the difference.
Phil, as we wrap this one up, I will say that Phil and I have talked at length over the last year and a half about a board game idea that I've been kicking around. And I know that Phil understands the mechanics. Like I had no idea about this Euro style thing. So it's a good thing I've got him as a consultant, but we've been bandying around the idea of a board game, and I won't give it away because I'm afraid someone's going to steal it and make it into a board game. That's right. I'm talking to you, Mark. I don't know if there's a Mark who listens to JJ Meets World, but if there is one, I'm sure he's the type of guy who would steal my idea.
We're not big in the Mark demographic, but we're working on it.
Okay. Are we good in any of the like names of guys I went to third grade with? Devin is another one.
We're popular with Devons. We're popular with Devons.
Okay, they're pretty loyal, the Devons of the world. So, Phil, as we let you go, thank you very much for joining us on another edition of JJ Meets World. Board games, they're a lot of fun, and they're really having a renaissance right now. I think picking up a board game is the perfect thing to do if you find yourself inside on a rainy day, or if you find yourself on a blizzardy afternoon, you can get so much play out of modern day board games, and they're not just meant for nerd culture. They're not just meant for kids. They are meant for entire families and groups of friends to enjoy.
Also, there are some board games that they make, by all means, you can play with people, but they have a solo variant in it where you could just play the board game by yourself if you really want to.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Yeah.
So, Phil, do us a favor. Send us a picture of your gaming closet, just so Tucker can fully understand what your dedication level is to the world of board games.
I will. It'll have to be a couple pictures since it's kind of spread out.
Use a wide angle lens.
Yeah.
All right. That does it for this episode of JJ Meets World. A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year, on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews, and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. If I don't win in a board game, I'm the guy who flips over the table, but I usually apologize within a week or 2.